Religions of Eastern Asia: Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, and Shintoism. This video will describe the elements of Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Shintoism, and examine the central ideas and cultural influences of East Asian religions. To begin with, Buddhism was started by Siddhartha Gautama, born around 563 in modern-day Nepal. He was raised Hindu and is a member of the Kshatriya caste. Keep in mind that the Kshatriya caste included individuals like princes, wealthy businessmen. So Siddhartha was somebody that was born into the privileges of life. But he was never satisfied with it. Within Hinduism, one is born into different castes in society. You had, the top levels, which were the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, usually had the best jobs in life. They had the best things that life had to offer. Whereas members of, say, the Shudras, the people that were responsible for doing the day-to-day kind of menial jobs in life, usually lived more of a hand-to-mouth existence. And this is different than many modern societies that are born on class systems. In class systems, it's wealth that determines what kind of a life you have access to. So if you're wealthier, usually it's first class tickets, you have larger houses, you can afford more expensive schools to attend. Whereas working class, you are usually going to be, operating off of a budget and riding coach. But it doesn't matter what class you're born into. There's always the possibility, however slim or however great, that you can advance into the class above you if, say, you're working class, or there's always the possibility that you could lose your wealth if you're wealthy and end up as in the middle class or in the working class. This is different within the traditional Hindu caste system. If you were like Siddhartha Gautama, who was born Kshatriya, then you stayed within that caste your whole life. Your jobs were defined by that caste. You even married within that caste. So Siddhartha was born to privilege, but when he looked around him, all he saw really was suffering and struggle. And he didn't understand why some people were born to privilege while others weren't. So he basically goes and he renounces his caste. He renounces his privilege as a prince. And he goes on this life journey where he tries everything. He tries, living the high life, eating the best food, just really having fun all the time. And that didn't satisfy him. He tried to live a religious life where he fasted so much that he basically wrecked his health, and that didn't bring him any closer to understanding, the nature of the universe and why some people suffer and the keys to happiness. So his life journey ends sitting under a Bodhi tree. And a Bodhi tree is what is seen in this image. And while he's sitting under this particular Bodhi tree, he has like this moment of clarity. He becomes enlightened, and it's at this time that he ceases really to be Siddhartha, and he becomes the Buddha. He becomes the enlightened one. Because he has essentially achieved nirvana. And nirvana is the goal of all Buddhists. To reach nirvana means that you are enlightened. You have reached a level of bliss on this earth that... got a little carried away with I'm just not even going to try to write this. Anyhow, nirvana means that you've reached a level of understanding of the world that the very few have ever achieve. Now, one of the challenges about Buddhism is that there's no real written record left by the Buddha himself. what basically happened after his death was that his teachings were passed down from disciple to disciple. And it wasn't until a couple centuries after his death that, Chinese travelers, Chinese Buddhists visiting India attempted to write down all the knowledge that is out there. And so it's left a little uncertainty today as to which teachings would be considered like the most essential for understanding Buddhism. And we'll look at this in greater depth here in a minute. But okay, returning back to the Bodhi tree and the Buddha's enlightenment. Basically, the Buddha comes to this realization of what he called the Four Noble Truths. And it starts, in essence, with the idea that life is, filled with suffering, and that it's the suffering that people desire to get rid of the most. And it's not just simply that life is about suffering. He came to the understanding of what causes suffering, and what causes suffering is its desire, its selfishness, it's all of these impulses that humans have. And all humans seek, or they have this secret yearning to end their suffering. And how do you end it? It's by following the Eightfold Path, basically a path that helps you to follow actions that lead to positive karma. In other words, good decisions, good spiritual decisions. And it's by following this Eightfold Path that you will eventually achieve samsara, which is the moksha, which is the breaking of samsara, this constant cycle of death and rebirth and experiencing the suffering all over again. And it's through this release, this breaking of the cycle, that humans finally achieve nirvana, which is this ultimate plane of understanding. So what is the Eightfold Path? It's basically right understanding, right thought, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. And this is the key. These are the key principles of Buddhism. So when you look at some of the symbols of Buddhism, one of their main symbols is that of a wheel with 8 spokes in it, and each of those spokes represents these virtues. So some examples of this, right speech. Don't use words that are meant to inflict pain. So like if you're in school, don't bully. That would be a good example of right speech. Not doing those types of things. Right action would include, is what people should do. Like if they are walking down the street and they see a homeless person, it can be something as simple as, taking a moment to give the person a sandwich. Right concentration. An example of this would be, when you go about your day-to-day activities, we should, put our full focus into what it is we're doing, our work, our school, our studies, our faith. So it's, a way of life, and it's one that instead of trying to say, rely on ritual to achieve salvation, or, instead of trying to starve yourself constantly by fasting, to achieve salvation. Instead, it's this really kind of moderate path that's just making positive choices, following positive actions to achieve nirvana. So it's this middle way. So Buddhism today is really split into 2 groups. There's Mahayana Buddhism, which is found mainly throughout China, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. And with Mahayana Buddhism, there's this real emphasis on the presence of divine people that help believers achieve nirvana. And depending on where you are, so one of the things about Buddhism is because it embraces different ways of looking at the world, it oftentimes, as it spread into different areas, it fused with local folk cultures. So there are some Buddhists that believe in a number of deities that can help achieve nirvana, whereas other Buddhists, like the Theravadas, they just believe really it's individual effort. Just like the Buddha had to sit beneath that Bodhi tree and work it out. Human beings today, it's them working out their own salvation. So within Mahayana Buddhism, one of the principal divine figures is the Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara. Usually, when you hear people refer to this deity, they just refer to the Bodhisattva, and this is a figure that through intervening in Buddhist lives, they can either reveal truth or kind of nudge people towards following the right path. And this is a principal concept of Buddhism itself, because the Buddha is more than just the Buddha who sat beneath the Bodhi tree. It's believed within Buddhism that there are multiple universes, multiple realities, and within multiple realities, there are times when a Buddha appears, this individual with complete understanding and enlightenment. And it's a really good time to be alive, because that's when enlightenment is truly open to all people. And so within one realm of existence, there can be multiple Buddhas over an extended a period of time. So in the Bodhisattva, this is like one incarnation of this divine figure. So going back to the issue of religious texts, again, there's no one Buddhist text. If you're looking at Christianity, you go to the Bible. If it's Islam, it's the Quran. Judaism's the Torah. With Hinduism, you have the Vedas. There's no one such book with or set of books really with Buddhism. So for people in Mahayana Buddhism, usually they tend to turn towards the sutras, a body of literature of Buddhist teachings. Now, the other group that I was talking about, the Theravada Buddhists, that really emphasize individual effort, these are found mainly throughout Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka. And within Theravada Buddhism, because there's such an emphasis on the individual, here the monastery, the Sangha, is going to play a bit more of a prominent role. So people going to Sanghas, and they're living a religious life, denying, not to extremes, but, denying desire. Still a big tradition. So here's where you'll usually see, Buddhist monks in the streets with their begging bowls, as they work their way towards enlightenment. And for the Theravada school of Buddhism, the religious texts that are usually embraced here is the Tipitaka, the three baskets. Now, the other major belief system within East Asia is Confucianism. And this was founded by Kongfutsu, who we commonly call Confucius, who was born around 551 BCE. And Confucius himself really wasn't a teacher of religion, and in fact, there's this, outlook that Confucianism is really more of a social philosophy. Although there are people, there are rituals that go along with Confucianism, so it's this kind of interesting, part philosophy, part religion. But Confucius himself, he was really just a teacher of ethics that emphasized society. And his writings sort of survive today as his students, the Analects. They wrote them down, so they're there for people to, as he taught them. So they're there for people to study even today. And so really at the heart of Confucianism when it comes to individual behavior is what is called his golden rule. And basically the idea here is, you don't do to other people what you don't like happen to yourself. In other words, do unto others. That's the golden rule of Confucius. Treat others as you would have them treat you. And another emphasis about Confucianism is hierarchy. So within society, there's a hierarchy that needs to be respected and followed. And within Chinese society, the top of the hierarchy was the son of heaven, the emperor. And so all people owed him allegiance, and they owed him loyalty. Now, this idea is what we called what was called then, and what we recognize today as the mandate of heaven. This idea that rulers had, the Son of Heaven had a right to govern the people, but he also had a duty to ensure their peace and their prosperity. So this is a little different than the European notion of the divine right of kings, where, in Europe, people believed God put the king on the throne and he could do no wrong. Even if he was a total tyrant, you owed him allegiance because God chose to put him here. This is different in China. The Son of Heaven had the right to rule, but that duty was also important, so that if an emperor failed to protect the people from invasions, if there was famine, if there was flooding, in the Changjiang River, if there was famine, pestilence, anything along those lines, then it was a sign that he had lost that mandate of heaven, and another family could rightfully overthrow him and begin a new dynasty within China. So hierarchy was important. It wasn't just simply social hierarchy or hierarchy within the government, but it was also hierarchy in the house. So just as the subjects of China owed loyalty to the Son of Heaven, children owed obedience to their parents. Their parents were to be honored and to be followed. And it wasn't just simply that, but even ancestors as a whole. So there, rituals still exist within China where you go and you visit the ancestral graves, and there, there are rituals to honor the dead. So society is really at the heart of Confucianism. And so these relationships, they extend throughout society, and even among, say, brothers. There's this concept known as filial piety within Confucianism, where the older brother is considered the leader. The younger brother owes loyalty to the older brother, and you should follow his advice, follow his example. And it's understandable, because if you're looking at all these connections in this hierarchy, then within the family, the father's the head of the household, and at one point he's going to die. And so what's going to happen is that responsibility and that role then passes to the older brother. So it's a way of maintaining these connections. So again, social commitment was everything. But again, the individual was not neglected. So for Confucianism, what about self-improvement? What about how did people be better? Well, step one is follow the golden rule. Step two is through education and self-cultivation. Even if you are poor, you need to learn to read. You need to learn, mathematics. You should still, learn to recognize, good music and poetry and art and beauty around you. And this was just a way of improving the self. So within Chinese society, because of Confucianism, their educational system was strong from very early in their history. Their state government tended to be very well organized, very well structured, very well trained. And so the Chinese were inventing things like, say, the wheelbarrow before the Roman Empire was formed, whereas Europeans, a contraption as simple as that, with science really lagging, especially after the fall of Rome, it takes them some time until the medieval ages to come up with that invention. Now, the next religion that we find in Central or East Asia was Taoism, established by Lao Tzu, and I'm giving the alternate spellings of these names as well here. And his writings are recorded in the Tao Te Ching, the classic of the way. And Taoism is a form of mysticism. So mystics basically seek to become one either with the God they worship or with the universe or nature around them. So everything about Taoism is understanding the universe. And one of the things that you need to understand about the universe is, balance, yin and yang. Understand the different elements: earth, wood, wind, fire, water, and metal, and how they connect, how they balance one another. And it's not expected really to try to conquer the universe or to try to conquer nature around you. On the contrary, Taoism really emphasizes, non-action, non-interference, non-control. So as an old proverb says, you don't try to struggle against the current if you're in the river. Instead, you flow with it. If life brings you happiness, accept it, embrace it. But the same is true of suffering. If there's a time of suffering, flow with it. Don't try to struggle and conquer it. And as with many other East Asian religions, like Buddhism, Taoism did not necessarily mean that you had to abandon traditional folk religions. So the different religions and the diversity of local beliefs are going to be fused in Taoism, just as they'll be fused in as Buddhism spreads across the region. Now, the final belief system was that of Shintoism. And Shintoism is found in Japan, and it came from an ancient Japanese belief, really a form of animism, or worshiping of spirits and nature. And so the principal figures within Shintoism are the kami. So you'll see here the large picture. That's a mountain demon, something that to be feared, and respected. And then the one to the far left, that's a benevolent spirit of nature that can help a person in life. So Shintoism, as it begins, early on, it's nature that the Japanese worship with their rituals, and over time, Confucianism and Buddhism are going to, they did spread from Buddhism from India into China, from China into other parts of East Asia, as they spread through Southeast Asia. And then they arrived in Japan, in Korea. And likewise, Confucianism, it begins in China, but it's going to flow outward, it's going to diffuse outward. And it will eventually arrive in Japan, or it eventually arrived in Japan as well. And so Shintoism over time was influenced also by Buddhism as well as Confucianism. So the emperor, once Japan ceases to be a clan structure, a clan-based government and society, and fuses together under the Yamato, under an emperor, the emperor himself will become a part of the Shinto belief system, with the emperor taking on the role of a deity. And it's going to be from this that eventually, Bushido will become a major element within society, especially amongst, the samurai and warriors. This idea that there's a duty that is owed to not only society, but also the emperor, and that, death is preferable before you dishonor yourself, you dishonor your family, you dishonor, the emperor. And this is going to be a belief system that's going to greatly influence the elements within Japanese society, even up until World War II. So it's this code of Bushido that in World War II, during the really harsh fighting in the Pacific Ocean or Pacific Theater, led Japanese soldiers, not to want to surrender, to prefer suicide charges against say American Marines in Okinawa, other than surrender. So very influential at multiple levels, not just the military, but Shintoism was very influential throughout Japanese society. So these are the major religions. We have Shintoism, Taoism, Confucianism, and then Buddhism that diffused throughout East Asia, will diffuse even into Southeast Asia, and in our modern world to the globe as a whole.